Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Lam, sitting in for David Zhang. Here's a preview of some of today's top stories. Apple faces a blockbuster antitrust lawsuit. Find out what the Justice Department and over a dozen states are accusing the tech company of doing. Is the IRS spying on Americans using artificial intelligence? The House Judiciary is launching an investigation into the concern. Idaho police have captured an inmate and a suspected accomplice following a manhunt earlier today. The two men were on the run after a shootout with police at a hospital. First up, a blockbuster antitrust lawsuit. Today, the Department of Justice, along with more than a dozen states, filed an antitrust lawsuit against Apple. Let's take a look. The suit was filed in the Federal District of New Jersey. It claims Apple monopolized the smartphone market, harming some apps, streaming services, and competing products.
We allege that Apple has employed a strategy that relies on exclusionary, anti-competitive conduct that hurts both consumers and developers. For consumers, that has meant fewer choices, higher prices and fees, lower quality smartphones, apps, and accessories, and less innovation from Apple and its competitors. For developers, that has meant being forced to play by rules that insulate Apple from competition. And as outlined in our complaint, we allege that Apple has consolidated its monopoly power, not by making its own products better, but by making other products worse.
Over the last 2 decades, Apple has become one of the most valuable public companies in the world. Today, its net income exceeds the gross domestic product of more than 100 countries. The long-anticipated lawsuit comes after years of allegations by critics. They claim Apple did so with restrictive App Store terms and high fees.
Apple charges as much as nearly $1,600 for an iPhone. But as our complaint alleges, Apple has maintained monopoly power in the smartphone market not simply by staying ahead of the competition on the merits, but by violating federal antitrust law. Consumers should not have to pay higher prices because companies break the law.
Apple, in a statement, said the lawsuit would set a dangerous precedent and hinder its ability to make the compelling and consumer-friendly technology that have made the company one of the most valuable in the world. Apple is the last major tech giant to be sued by the federal government since the company was named in a sprawling 2020 House report. The report found that Apple, Meta, Google, and Amazon hold monopoly power. Now let's take a look at other top headlines. President Biden will soon be invited to testify in his own impeachment inquiry. The House panel investigating influence peddling is winding up its probe. House Oversight Chair James Comer says Americans need to hear from the president himself. He says that way President Biden can explain why his family received tens of millions of dollars from foreign companies with his assistance. This comes after 2 of Hunter Biden's former business associates testified yesterday. One business associate, Jason Galanis, is serving a 15-year sentence on fraud charges and testified from prison. He says prosecutors were uninterested in evidence he had of Hunter Biden's crimes and believes the reason was political.
I believe I've been a victim of a pattern of retribution by the Department of Justice. I believe I'm putting myself at grave risk within the BOP for providing information on these matters concerning the president and his son.
Galanis testified Hunter Biden put his then vice president father on speakerphone with a Russian oligarch and her husband in 2014 and leveraged the family name with Chinese businessman Henry Zhao. The other associate, Tony, alleged Hunter Biden and James Biden perjured themselves during deposition.
We keep hearing from certain corners that our democracy is at risk and democracy is on the ballot in 24. Yet the same people preaching this mantra know better. They continue to lie directly to the American people without hesitation and remorse.
The panel will issue a final report with recommendations once the inquiry has concluded. The White House says Republicans need to move on and focus on other issues. White House spokesman Ian Sams called the investigation a sad stunt and told Comer to call it a day. Former President Donald Trump's fundraising picked up last month, but his political operation is still far behind President Biden. Biden has more than double the money in the bank compared to Trump. Trump, meanwhile, has a slight polling advantage in swing states, which could decide November's election. In February, Biden's campaign said it raised more than $53 million, giving it a total of more than $155 million. Trump, meanwhile, raised $39 million in February, with a total of $74 million. Trump so far has been unable to secure a $464 million bond to pay for a civil action judgment against him in the state of New York. The New York Attorney General's office has taken steps to seize Trump's assets, including his golf course, Trump Tower, and private estate in New York. This week, President Biden attended 2 private fundraising events in Texas. Trump's campaign is bogged down by legal fees. Just last month, his political action committee, Save America, spent more than $5 million on legal fees. Is the IRS spying on Americans using artificial intelligence? The House Judiciary is launching an investigation into the concern. The Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan and fellow Republican Harriet Hageman sent letters to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Attorney General Merrick Garland informing them of the probe. The IRS said in a September 2023 press release that it would be employing AI to crack down on tax evasion. Jordan and Hageman pointed to a report from James O'Keefe's O'Keefe Media Group. According to the report, the IRS is also using AI to surveil citizens' bank accounts, quote, en masse and without legal process. The manhunt for an inmate in Boise, Idaho has ended. Police say the prison gang member and his accomplice are now in custody. The 2 men were on the run after escaping a hospital amidst a shootout that injured 3 officers. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the story.
Right around 2 p.m. this afternoon, following a lengthy investigation, the 2 suspects who we have been seeking were located in Twin Falls, the Twin Falls area. Out of the short vehicle pursuit, and both suspects were taken into custody.
At 2:15 a.m., Idaho Department of Corrections officers were attacked while preparing to transfer Skylar Mead back to prison from St. Alphonsus Regional Medical Center in Boise on Wednesday. As they readied to transport Mead, Nicholas Umfenhauer, later identified as a suspect, opened fire on the officers. 2 officers were shot, one sustaining non-life-threatening injuries, while the other remained stable but in critical condition. Mead and Umfenhauer fled and were last seen in a gray Honda Civic with Idaho plates. Mead was described as a 31-year-old white man, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with 2 face tattoos, the number 1 on one side and 11 on the other. Umfenhauer is described as a 28-year-old white man, 5 feet 9 inches tall, with the beard and a neck tattoo. Amid the hospital shootout, a Boise police officer fired at an armed individual at the entrance, who was later identified as a corrections department officer. Police say this was a coordinated attack. Christina Corona, NTD News.
An illegal immigrant was charged in a double stabbing incident in Missouri. The police say the victims are the suspect's neighbor and his brother. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
On Sunday, 2 men were stabbed at a laundromat in O'Fallon, Missouri. The police reported that there was a brief exchange before the suspect pulled a pocket knife from his sock. He then allegedly assaulted, then chased and stabbed both men in the back. Jose Barrera was arrested and charged with the stabbings. The police said that Homeland Security issued a detainer on Barrera, recognizing him as entering the U.S. illegally at Eagle Pass, Texas. The victims were taken to a hospital and both suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Authorities have reported a surge of illegal homemade machine guns. They're involved in many of the recent large-scale shootings because they are hard to distinguish from the semi-automatic guns.
Communities around the U.S. have seen shootings carried out with weapons converted to fully automatic in recent years, fueled by a staggering increase in small pieces of metal or plastic made by a 3D printer or ordered online. Last November, 11-year-old Dominic Davis was killed when a hail of gunfire sprayed out from a passing car in Cincinnati. He was not far from his mom's home. 4 other children and a woman were hurt.
He didn't deserve to go at all. He didn't deserve to go like he did, and it wasn't his time. So he wasn't just out there being a bad kid or...
The shooting remains under investigation, but federal investigators believe the 22 shots could be fired off with lightning speed because the weapon had been illegally converted to fire like a machine gun. Laws against machine guns date back to the bloody violence of Prohibition-era gangsters, but authorities said the proliferation of devices known by nicknames such as Glock switches, auto-sears, and chips has allowed people to transform legal semi-automatic weapons into even more dangerous guns, helping fuel gun violence.
Different kinds of devices, all aimed at doing the same thing, which is making a legal firearm into an illegal machine gun. And people invent new ways to do it, cheaper ways, quicker ways, more dangerous ways.
In a demonstration by ATF agents, the firing of a semi-automatic outfitted with a conversion device was nearly indistinguishable from an automatic weapon. Conversion devices with differing designs can fit a range of different guns, enabling guns to fire at a rate of 800 or more bullets per minute.
Plates, looking at the back plates here, to where you would not be able to tell the difference with these, with law enforcement, state, federal, local, whatever it may be, just by picking this up and looking at it. You would actually have to review the internal components of this to make sure they're there, because they're practically exactly the same just by visual look alone. However, this firearm here would actually have a machine gun conversion device installed, and this one does not. This is your standard Glock backplate, to where this one has been 3D printed as a machine gun conversion device.
The ATF reported a 570% increase in the number of conversion devices collected by police departments between 2017 and 2021, the most recent data available. The devices that can convert legal semi-automatic weapons can be made on a 3D printer in about 35 minutes or ordered from overseas online for less than $30. They're also quick to install. Guns with conversion devices have been used in several large shootings, including one that left 4 dead at a Sweet 16 party in Alabama last year and another that left 6 people dead at a bar district in Sacramento in 2022. In Houston, police officer William Jeffrey died in 2021 after being shot with a converted gun while serving a warrant. In cities such as Indianapolis, police have seized them every week.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come right back. Best Buy plans to close more stores this year. Find out how many stores and the reason behind the move. A Louisiana museum plans to use AI in their World War II exhibit. Visitors have conversations with war veterans. Shohei Ohtani is firing his interpreter. This comes amid allegations of theft and gambling. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Lamb. Best Buy is planning on closing 10 to 15 stores in 2024. This comes after the electronics retailer closed 24 already last year. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
During a fourth quarter earnings call last month, Best Buy CFO Matthew Bilunas told investors that 2024 will have more store closures for the company. Last year, the retailer closed 24 stores. This year, along with closing 10 to 15 more, they plan to offer a smaller customer experience in some markets. Bilunas said the company will, quote, close existing traditional stores during our rigorous review of stores as their leases come up for renewal. Other stores could also see some remodeling. CEO Corey Sue Berry said that the changes will bring relevancy and excitement to the store centers. It was not specified which stores will be closed. The reasons cited included lowered product innovation during the pandemic and customer spending habits. Other retailers also recently announced location closure plans, including Macy's closing 150 stores and Dollar Tree Inc. closing 1,000. Jason Blair, NTD News.
An interactive exhibit in Louisiana will use artificial intelligence to let visitors hold a virtual conversation with World War II veterans. NTD's Christina Corona shares more on the new experience.
As of Wednesday, the National World War II Museum in New Orleans will debut an interactive exhibit that will allow visitors to engage in virtual conversations with images of veterans, including a Medal of Honor recipient who passed away in 2022.
I'm so glad that it's come along because we can do by mechanical devices what we're not going to be around to do in the future. There are fewer and fewer World War II veterans and a lot of people who will never see one, but they can come here.
The exhibit is combined with voice recognition software and artificial intelligence.
So that all the visitor has to do is press the button, ask a question, and the software matches their question to the most appropriate of those 1,000 answers that the veteran gave.
According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the men and women who fought in this war are now 90 years of age or beyond.
You know, we're beginning to get to a time when the opportunity to speak to a real World War II veteran is more and more rare. But this will allow people for the next 100 years to talk to World War II veterans and really have a real conversation, not just watch a film on TV.
The exhibit will also allow visitors to pose questions to Homefront heroes and U.S. war effort supporters.
I'm making history to see myself telling the story of what happened to me over there. I'm so proud that I'm here, that people can see me.
Others among them are a military nurse from the Philippines, an aircraft factory worker, and Margaret Carey, a USO performer who later inspired Disney's Tinkerbell. According to the National World War II Museum, less than 1% of the 16.1 million Americans who served during World War II are still with us today. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Fitness guru Richard Simmons announced on social media that years ago he had been diagnosed with skin cancer. He shared his experience about finding out and recovery on social media. NTD's Jason Blair has more on this story.
Former workout star Richard Simmons posted on social media about his experience of being diagnosed with skin cancer by his dermatologist after he found a small bump under his eye. He described how the doctor was able to successfully remove it with minor surgery. He shared the story over 2 separate posts on Tuesday and Wednesday. On the last post, he said, quote, "I know some of you reading this have had cancer or have known someone in your life who has had cancer. Promise me you will see your doctor and get a complete checkup." A few hours later, he posted again, saying he received a tremendous response about his cancer story. He said it happened many years ago, and quote, "The reason I wrote these 2 messages is that if you see a spot on your body, please go to your doctor so they can diagnose it right away." Jason Blair, NTD News.
Dodgers player Shohei Ohtani has fired his interpreter amid allegations of theft. NTD's Tyler Castillo has the latest on this story.
The Los Angeles Dodgers have fired Shohei Ohtani's interpreter amid allegations of massive theft. Interpreter Ippei Mizuhara is accused of stealing millions after questions came up about wire transfers being sent from Ohtani's bank account to a bookmaker operation tied to sports betting. In California, where the Dodgers call home, sports betting remains illegal. What sparked this firing process was when a reporter asked about the wire transfers, according to ESPN. A spokesperson for Ohtani told ESPN that funds were transferred to cover Mizuhara's gambling debt, which reportedly reached over $4.5 million. The spokesman and Mizuhara did not go into details about who carried out the alleged theft. Ohtani and Mizuhara were close friends before and during their tenure as professional co-workers. Mizuhara's salary pay is between $300,000 to $500,000 annually, confirmed by reports. The transfers exceeded his pay, which sparked concerns that the MLB is now looking into. Federal investigators are now involved and looking into the case.
A pair of orphaned bear cubs are getting comfortable in their new habitat in an Oregon zoo. Let's see how they're doing.
Twin black bear cubs that wildlife officials in Alaska rescued are exploring their new habitat at the Oregon Zoo in Portland. The cubs, named Timber and Thorn, arrived at the zoo in December, but until now have spent most of their time behind the scenes. Zookeepers say the pair has now grown comfortable in the zoo's Great Northwest area and spends their time climbing trees and wrestling each other. Eventually, Timber and Thorn will be acclimated to the zoo's 2 adult black bears, Cubby and Dale, that share the habitat. The cubs were named after Portland's 2 Major League Soccer teams, the Timbers and the Thorns.
Stay tuned for China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer coming up next. Rising violence spreading across China. Cars crashing into motorcycles and students. Men wielding knives to slash people on the street. A 13-year-old boy allegedly killed by classmates. What's behind this mounting chaos? Tune in at 9:30 for NTD's China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer. That's all we've got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Lamb, sitting in for David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.